Hello down here.
Hey everybody, this is Atticus, a death metaler. Originally, I was going to focus more onto starting up the very first episode of my movie and TV review series, but one topic, one little rant had to be finished. So why not? Why not just do a little rant before I go on this epic, making this epic series. So the topic of this video is just about this discussion that's been going on not too long ago, and it's kind of really irking me. And yes, it's of course on the recent new God of War game. So what I'm specifically talking about onto the new God of War game, just to let all of you guys know, I have nothing against the recent installment of the God of War franchise. I think it looks beautifully made. The graphics, the plot, the storyline, the characters, Kratos back, being a father figure to Atreus. It is so well put together, but it's the conversation on Kratos is what really irks me, because all of a sudden you have people that are blurting this shit out right here.
The Kratos games and the God of War games have been so enjoyable, but now it's really about getting to know this character and the relationship that he has with the people that he cares about that hits you right here.
This depth and complexity transforms Kratos from the previous God of War games as flat embodiment of the bloodthirsty warrior cliché into an internally conflicted father.
The way they humanize Kratos is really important and cannot be understated, because this is a character from the era where, dads don't cry, basically.
He is pretty one note and also not subtle at all, and they managed to endow this character with humanity and nuance.
Oh yeah.
We've seen games where they try to tell an interesting story and be weighty and meaningful, and we're going to try and do it too with the character who cannot possibly do.
Kratos was a blank slate, an angry, sometimes ironically passive-aggressive character who saw nothing but blood and spoke of nothing but feasting on it. God of War 2018 is about the pain of losing someone and finally coming to terms with that, the quest to conquer the emotions that take over in these trying times. It's about being a single father. It's about teaching your son how to survive in a cruel world. It's about the struggle of building the bond between father and son.
This game has made Kratos so much more complex. It's fleshed him out in ways that I didn't think were possible or even necessary. I was fine with Kratos being the Ghost of Sparta, the kick-ass machine I always knew him as. I didn't know I wanted him to be something else. Now that they have added complexity to him, to this degree and this level, I can't ever see me in my perception of Kratos going back. How did I ever feel like Kratos of old was enough?
And I just have to say this. I just really have to say this to you people. And I know a lot of people are probably gonna come after me for this, but Kratos was always a three-dimensional character.
What? You're great! You're eminent!
Especially in the older games. The three God of War games, two of them on PS2 and PS3, and of course God of War Ascension and the two PSP games, Kratos was always deep. He was always a three-dimensional character. Like, what the fuck were you guys on? And I know most of you people are gonna mention these two YouTubers right here, but I'm just gonna get it out of the way right here. I will indeed give a shout out to some black guy on a second channel, Derek Blackman, and where we talked about it, but it is the channel Endless Jess that made a phenomenal video onto, talking about Kratos throughout the entire franchise, and I have left down their videos down in the description below so that you can, see their opinions onto Kratos. Now, many of you would say that I don't have a leg to stand on because I am of the inferior console race of owning an Xbox One. But for a 13-year-old Atticus the Death Metaler, I did have a PS2 back in the days. And during that time in the summer of 2005, I rented my first mature-rated video game off of Blockbuster when they were still fucking around. My god, I am old. And my first mature-rated video game that I rented and played was, of course, God of War. Now, before even coming across God of War in 2005, I remember when I was young, I watched the Disney film Hercules when I was very young, and that pretty much just catapulted me into getting very deep into Greek mythology. I would spend at the school library reading up all the multiple Greek myths, just basically just diving down onto Greek mythology. And then I heard about God of War, which, you know, had a really badass, raging, roided up, terrifying Spartan that just killed anything in its path. But it took a while to realize that, you know, it was a mature rated video game. But overall, during the summer of 2005, I rented the game and I played it. And at the very beginning, I could just tell that this really terrifying, intimidating, just jacked up freak of nature, the ghost of Sparta, Kratos, was a man who was absolutely troubled by his past. At the very beginning,
the gods of Olympus have abandoned me. Now there is no hope.
Was a man that was just haunted by the sins of his past and jumped to his death. I mean, Kratos was a Spartan captain that wanted to bring out the glory of Sparta throughout the entire classical world. But ultimately, when he was about to die from a barbarian invasion, he calls out Ares, the god of war, to pledge, basically dealing with the devil at this point, and where he basically did all of Ares' bidding, killing his enemies, giving him the infamous blades of chaos, his absolute crazy and terrifying weapons, which I personally thought were the sickest weapons of, like, you know, video games I've ever seen. And like, Kratos was doing all these mass atrocities in the bidding of Ares, and Ares was trying to make Kratos into the perfect warrior, and thus, like, Kratos blindly killed the people that mattered most to him, his wife and child, and thus, you know, Ares tricked Kratos to being the perfect warrior to basically rob all of humanity out of Kratos, and thus Kratos realized that what he was doing was going way too far, and thus became the ghost of Sparta, having the horrible traumatic nightmares of his greatest sin, killing his family, as well as having the ashes of his wife and daughter embedded on his flesh as a reminder of what he has become, which just illustrates the ultimate Greek tragedy right there. And there were many times in the game, even at the first game, it showed a lot of just Kratos saying to himself, by the gods, what have I become? Just hating himself for what he's done. And even at the final boss fight with Ares in this nightmare sequence, in that part, you had to face an army of evil doppelgangers. And just protect your wife and child, and if they get hurt, you basically have to recharge your health by hugging them and sacrificing your health. That was pretty, you know, three-dimensional right there. And after killing your evil doppelgangers, Ares is a cheater like that, rips the blades of chaos and kills his family once again. And I can still remember, even as a little, you know, as a preteen playing that part and just seeing his family die again and him saying, no, not again.
I have taught you many ways to kill a mortal, Kratos. Flesh that burns, bones that break. But to break a man's spirit is to truly destroy him. There is a price to pay for everything you gain.
Not that price. I didn't want them to die.
No price is too high for what I offered. Now, you will have no power, no magic. All that is left for you is death.
Oh, not again.
And ultimately, he kills Ares in the process. And even after killing Ares, like, they still don't rid him of his sins, which is the reason why he fell to his death at the very beginning of the game. I mean, like, even when the first game came out, there was a lot of great reception on how complex Kratos was. It's like, what the fuck are you guys even talking about? I also do recall, and Endless Jest made a great example of this, in the Chains of Olympus PSP game. There's a part in where you basically have to pry your crying daughter away from you.
Please! Father, no!
Just watching that is just so fucking heartbreaking to watch. If you, like, oh my god, just the shit going on in the entire God of War franchise. Yes, in the third God of War, like Kratos, every ounce of humanity has been stripped away because he's been fucked over by not only by the gods, but the Titans as well, and getting sick and tired of just being betrayed and just fucked over. It's no wonder that he's just lost it. And even after, you know, Pandora fulfilling her destiny with the little amount of humanity he has left, he's like, I don't think this is all worth it.
The fires of hope will set us free.
Pandora, no!
You know why I'm here. You brought me here to do this.
I will find another way.
No, Kratos. There is no other way. Let me go!
No, child!
I am not a child! You're hurting me!
But unlike with what Derek Blackman and Endless Jest have talked about onto Kratos, I've done a little bit of research as a Greek mythology junkie myself. I basically found out that Kratos' character is derived off of two well-known Greek heroes, Hercules and Achilles. Let me explain. Now, Achilles is well known as being the Greek hero that was pretty much just almost invincible in battle, except for, well, his heel. That's why we have the term Achilles heel. But Achilles, not only was he unstoppable in battle, not only was his only weak spots the heel, he was also well known for one thing: wrath.
Achilles, who is the hero of the Greek army, is dodged by anger. The first 20 books, he's angry at Agamemnon. The 22nd through 24th book, he's angry at Hector. He is angry.
Take the first line of the Iliad. Sing, O goddess, the wrath of Peleus' son Achilles, whose anger brought pains 1,000-fold upon the Achaeans.
Pretty much, Achilles, just like Kratos, was a man that was overcome by absolute anger and wrath, and even using his wrath and his anger to put the entire Greek army in jeopardy, gaining a lot of victories from the Trojans and stuff. So I could see had unbridled anger and passion out onto Agamemnon, Hector, everyone around him, just pure anger. That unbridled passion and anger is what many people think that Kratos is always like from Achilles. Now, yes, they are both warriors, great warriors, but Kratos is a lot different than Achilles. While Achilles is basically what everyone thinks that Kratos is, which is we're going over to Hercules. As I've explained earlier onto this video, what got me absolutely super hooked onto Greek mythology is that of Disney's 1997 film Hercules. Obviously, Hercules, when I was a little kid, was basically my favorite Greek hero. but as I've grown to read up more onto the actual original myth of Hercules, I discovered that Hercules is kind of like Kratos' human side. Now let me try to explain here. Now if you all do remember that Ares tried to make Kratos into the perfect warrior by driving him into a blind rage, thus resulting in killing his wife and child, becoming the ghost of Sparta, and thus Kratos pretty much just trying to do a lot of good deeds for the gods, thus resulting into killing Ares and, you know, thinking that would rid him of his trauma, his sins, his nightmares, his PTSD. But they were forgiven, and yet they would not rid him of his trauma, his PTSD. Well, that's kind of what Hercules was like in a sense. Now, instead of Ares trying to make Kratos into the perfect warrior, it was Hera that pretty much wanted Hercules dead. No, it wasn't Hades in the Disney film. It was basically Hera. If you all must know, guys, Zeus is a man whore. Oh, babe! Plowing his seed to a lot of mortal women, thus resulting in hundreds of illegitimate children, you know, like Hercules and Perseus, just to name a few. I can't name all of Zeus's children. Let's just say Zeus went raw on a lot of mortals, and Kratos happened to be one of his children, but we're talking about Hercules here. And while Zeus was plowing, bringing out a ton of illegitimate children, you can just tell that Hera was a pretty salty bitch over onto Zeus's infidelities. And seeing that Hercules was a child of Zeus and, you know, settling down with a family, basically Hera tricked Hercules, sending him to a blind rage that his family was in danger, but thus resulting over him killing his family. And overcome with grief and just distraught and just absolute misery, Hercules does the thing that we all know that he was well known for, doing 12 labors, as in basically strangling a lion that was pretty much impervious to all weapons to death, to basically going down to the depths of the underworld to retrieve Hades' hellhound Cerberus. And even after a little scruffle with a centaur, I believe, and being poisoned, he was just like, fuck it, just burn me onto a pyre, and thus, you know, he basically became a god, and Hera forgave, you know, Hercules for all the shit that, you know, him being an illegitimate child of Zeus. And, you know, everything was all good for Hercules, except for, you know. I had to bring that there. Oh, poor Hercules. So yes, combine the unbridled wrath and anger of Achilles, leader of the Myrmidons, and the misery and trauma and grief of Hercules trying to repent for his sins, and you basically get Kratos, the modern Greek hero or anti-hero. I mean, we all do know throughout the entire God of War franchise that Kratos is not a good person, without a doubt. But that does not mean that you get to see his human side throughout the entire franchise before, you know, the new installment of God of War, where he's teaching Atreus in, you know, the Norse realms and shit like that. Kratos always had that human side, but overall throughout the entire franchise, his humanity was stripped away, being fucked over by everyone that he tried to gain their trust, but they fucked him over anyway, and that made him into an absolutely bitter and vengeful person, to pretty much just destroying the entire Greek pantheos. And upon his vengeance, his absolute atonement was to just kill himself. Throughout all that entire shit that he's basically went through. You know, just dying multiple times and coming back from the underworld. And ultimately, the only thing that could kill Kratos was himself. And during that time, he really hated himself. Being just like, he really did hate himself. But in the new God of War game, I could see why a lot of people think that he's changed. He's at peace with himself. He's, you know, you see more of that human side onto Kratos. And he's willing to try to bury his deep and dark, violent past behind him until later on, and I do remember seeing a clip where he retrieves his blades of chaos, and that epic scene just...
But there is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.
Oh my god. Just absolutely amazing right there. And I do remember seeing Wisecracks talked about Kratos and where he was this violent individual trying to leave his past behind him, but in order for him to save his son, he is willing to bring back his violent past because he can never change because he is a monster. But you know, that scene right there was so awesome. And so yeah, I can understand why a lot of people think that he's a changed person, but they fail to realize that Kratos was always three-dimensional. He always displayed his human side into all of the God of War games. Not just the trilogy, but the two PSP games, Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta, and God of War Ascension. He always had that side right there. So you going around saying that you like the new Kratos and, you know, didn't really like the old Kratos, it just completely slaps all the people behind the original God of War franchise, just slapping them right in the face, and also slapping in the face of everyone that gave out those, you know, reviews on how complex Kratos' character was, even at the first game. Even when I was 13 years old playing the first God of War, I knew that this was a very, very deep and complex third-dimensional character. Even though he was a very bad, very messed up individual, he still had a lot of depth, and you could see his humanity brought out into the first game and the other games beyond, even as his humanity was being stripped away every installment. I mean, he's always had that and stuff. So that's just my take onto you know, Kratos and what you know, people like Endless Jess, Derek Blackman stated onto Kratos. So I'm gonna leave down their links, a bunch of other links on the research that I've made down onto the description below. Watch them, really entertaining stuff. Now before I end this video, just want to give out a few more updates after, you know, finishing what I had to say on to God of War. This upcoming week, I am going to be at Orlando for the 14th and the 15th. I will be shooting footage for, you know, my boys from Spawn of 13, Varinger, and Withering Earth, a bunch of other great local acts as well, because they're going to be playing with Insomnium that night. And of course, on June 15th, I finally get to see Slayer. Finally. So it's going to be a pretty special time. It is indeed going to be my first and last time I will ever see Slayer. Though Jeff Hanneman is dead and Dave Lombardo's not with the band, it still helps that Paul Bostoff is the drummer and Gary Holt of my favorite thrash band, Exodus, is with Slayer. But it's going to be an absolutely awesome show. And after doing all that, I will be focusing on the inaugural debut episode of my movie and TV review series. So I'm pretty much going to be pulling a lot of my time and energy into making this first episode, so it's gonna be pretty wild. So I cannot wait to get this all down. So without further ado, ladies and gents, I am Atticus, the Death Metaler. Hope you like this video. Subscribe to my channel. Links are in the description below. Keep it metal and have an excellent day, guys. Cheers!